Destiny is in three phases. There's discovery, there's development, and then there's deployment or delivery. Those are the three phases of destiny. So it's one thing to discover it, it's one thing to articulate it. A lot of parents make the comment that I was once a teenager, and no, you were not. A teenager in 1987 and a teenager in 2017 are in two different worlds. Every young person is adventurous by nature. What you can control is the environment. You can't really control all of the actions, all of the details, but you can control the scene on which they play. One very great thing about being a young person is that you have a natural flair for curiosity, a natural quest for learning, for learn the right kind of things.
Welcome to yet another episode of P&T Show. I am your host, Precious Flores Ifeanyichukwu, and it's such a delight to bring you today's episode, and I'm so glad that I'm doing it with one of my favorite persons. He has been a close friend, a colleague in the ministry, and someone that is very passionate about mentoring and coaching young people. So I'll give you a little bit of his background. Coach Chiedozie Eze is a dedicated personal development coach, entrepreneur, and public speaker, passionate about guiding teenagers and young people towards fulfilling their potential. With a diverse human resources, logistics, and supply chain management background, Chiedozie brings a unique perspective to the coaching and mentoring approach. He runs a yearly mentorship program for teenagers and young adults and also convenes the 360 Success Bootcamp with the empowering theme, Thrive, which means training highly resourceful individuals with value and excellence. Through his transformative work, Chiedozie continues to positively impact the lives of countless individuals and inspire them to reach new heights and personal and professional success. Ladies and gentlemen, Chiedozie Eze is right here before us for this wonderful time. Thank you, sir, for coming again.
My honor. Thank you.
So I'm going to take off from exactly what you do.
Okay.
What you do on a larger scale, because so long as I've known you, you've been in the team mentoring industry.
Yeah.
So what has the journey been like for you? What has the experience been like mentoring teenagers, interfacing with them every now and again?
Yeah, it's been interesting, generally speaking. Of course, it comes with its highs and the lows, especially because you're dealing with human beings. So it's not like, so everything you read about in my bio is true. When you're dealing with systems that are inanimate, you can very well predict outcomes. But when you're dealing with human beings that have emotions, that have wills, they have intellect and all of that, so the dynamics are different. And when you're dealing with energetic people also, yeah, so, but put that all together, it's been an interesting journey, something that I enjoy doing as well.
And you want to do that over and again?
Sure.
So you work with teenagers. In fact, you run a yearly mentorship program.
Yeah.
And it means that you almost relate to teenagers every single day.
Every day.
In the morning, in the night, maybe in the midnight too. Because there are always the cases to settle.
Well, yes, in the midnight, sometimes I had to put a lot of structure around that. But just now that you mentioned it, it crossed my mind.
Yeah.
We work with teenagers from every part of the world. And
yes.
I remember that I used to pray one prayer like that I won't talk about here, but when I started working with teenagers across different parts of the world, and somebody wakes up, it's morning in Australia, and me, I want to sleep. And they call my phone and say somebody did something. And I'm like, okay, it's 12 midnight, I want to sleep. Can I talk to that guy in the next 6 hours? And stuff like that. So yeah, sometimes it happens, yes.
Okay.
But like I said, it's interesting.
It's
interesting, yeah.
All
it's
right.
interesting to be part of parenting journeys of so many families and helping, raise a generation of responsible, successful young people that thrive.
Yeah. I think it's a journey worth it.
Yeah, it is.
And you've been doing such an incredible work.
Thank you.
Yeah, partnering with parents across the world to do this thing called parenting. So you wrote a book recently.
Yeah. Why Teens Fail.
Why Teens Fail. That book caught my attention because a lot of parents tag their teenagers' failure for many reasons, right? Yeah. And you wrote that book, very phenomenal book. I want you to take us through the journey of why you wrote the book.
Okay.
And let's also look at what are the challenges that teenagers face, of course, which contributes to why they fail.
Yeah, so Okay, the story about why things fail is fascinating even to me.
Okay.
So I should I share this? I was sitting down in church. I was sitting down in church one morning, and it just started coming to me. Because we have had and we constantly have those conversations where we're looking for why a young person is not doing well. Academics, relationship, they are hanging out with the wrong crowd, running with the bad group and stuff like that, peer pressure and things like that. And we are constantly looking for something to target on. But over time, I wrote that book last year. It will interest you to know that I started writing that book in 2021.
Whoa.
So it took 2 years to write. Not because I didn't know what to write, but I needed to validate some of the conversations going on in the book. Okay, so one of the things I learned in that period of time, also from years of working with teenagers, even before when I decided to write the book, is that all the things we point to as problems for teenagers, quote and unquote problems, are really symptoms. They are signs. It's like you have a headache, you're throwing up, or you're running temperature, and in our society, you just go and treat malaria and typhoid. You just go and treat malaria and typhoid.
Okay.
But if you would subject yourself to some sort of investigation, you will see that it's not always malaria and typhoid.
Seriously.
Headaches and temperatures could be signs of 1,001 illnesses. All right, and people have died treating the wrong things. You know, so I began to realize that some of the things we point to as issues with young people, people generally, just that this group are peculiar, are just symptoms of some underlying things. And that's what I wrote about in that book. The book, by the way, was written to teenagers. All right, but I also wanted to do something that parents could connect with. It was written to teenagers. If you open the book, it was written to teenagers. It was written, I wanted to help a young person understand what is going on. Have you ever talked to a young person and they tell you, I don't know what's happening to me?
Exactly, that line. That line.
I don't know what's happening to me. So, but I wanted to help a young person understand.
To self-diagnose, kind of.
Because I've been preaching self-awareness. A lot of persons don't get it. There's very little you can do until you understand who you are in your core. So that whole conversation is what I weaved into that book, trying to get a young person to understand, okay, this is my journey. This is what is happening. And so when you see something, knowledge, wisdom is a principality, like one of my mentors will say. When you see something, you are armed with information, you are armed with the tool to, just like you said, self-diagnose, and you already know how to respond. You know, for instance, that as bad as headache feels, it could be this or it could be that. As bad as the temperature rising is, if I do this and that, I'm going to feel better. There is nothing wrong with me. There's a doctor that I love in the US who would say that every form of sickness is a cell in your body telling you something. And so if you will learn to listen to that cell, if you will learn to listen to that signal, and most of the work with teenagers is trying to get them to find help in the right places. That's just it. And so why teenagers fail is an X-ray of about 7 core principles of what challenges. The word I use in the book is crisis. What crisis that young people encounter as adolescents and how to navigate those crises. That's what it is about.
So can you share what some of those crises are?
Okay, I'll share the first and very commonly ignored one is identity crisis. Who you are.
And this is something that you're very big on.
I'm very big on
it. For the longest time, I've heard you talk about self-identity, self-crisis. So let's get into it a little bit.
There's a movie I love a lot. When I talk to my
and I'm going to guess that movie. Lion King.
That's it. So I love that movie because each time I watch it, I see a different.
By the way, you made me watch that movie the second time.
Yeah, you should go and see it the second time.
Okay.
Shake and see the third time, because yes, every time I see it, I see something new. All right, the whole Simba running away from the palace, the Pride lands, and running into the wrong crowd.
Yeah.
Okay, was an identity crisis. Like, if somebody told this guy
That
you were the king, you are the heir apparent, that whole dynamics would have changed. If his father, I think his father tried to communicate that, but his father was, mentorship today, tomorrow, and things like that. But just to draw an inspiration from there to help explain what I'm trying to say about identity crisis is the moment a person, teenager or not, loses a sense of identity, they're going to do a whole lot of things. They're going to do a whole lot of things. Yeah.
That's
the
it.
day the ego begins to think that they are like foul,
Talk to me.
they'll behave like that.
Yeah.
So identity crisis is the crux. We can talk about all the other issues, but identity crisis. You are a king. You are, when you go to school, I don't know when you got an admission into university, did they ever tell you, remember the son of who you are? Remember the daughter of who you are? And things like that.
That's a very unique line.
They tell you those things. But many times, the person you're talking to does not actually know. Like, I'm the son of who? My father is my father. You understand? What is the content of that identity? What is my purpose? What is my destiny? And when I talk like this, some person think, this guy is just 12. Why are you discussing that? And then I take you down history and show you figure after figure, icon after icon, whose identities were clearly defined. In fact, I believe strongly that everybody's identity is declared even before they were born. And so if you let a child grow up until 16, now get admission to the university, now start saying, remember who you are. They never knew. You did not explain that identity all of this while. And so they're going to have a crisis. They're going to have a crisis.
But then they're already formed.
Young people already have an issue with it. It's natural. So I used to say this years ago, that the biggest problem of a teenager is, I'm not a child and I'm not an adult, so who am I? Everybody treats a teenager like a child and expects them to act like adults. Your communication is already confused and confusing.
Wow, you can say that again.
Yes, everybody treats a teenager like a child and expects them to behave like adults. That communication is confusing.
Yeah.
On its own, that communication is confusing. So you yell, you shout, you do all of these things. Then you come back in the evening and you say, didn't you know that you were supposed to do this? Is your mate not doing this? And all of that. And so can we reframe that conversation into a more empowering conversation, that's the word, empowering conversation, so that this young person can go right ahead and do what they're supposed to do when they're supposed to do it. Okay, so you have not prepared this young person over the years, and all of a sudden you thrust on them some kind of responsibilities that they are not ready for. Typically, a young person is already struggling with their coming of age. Like I said, this person is not a child, but I'm not an adult. Okay? So who am I? What's going on? A lot of changes biologically.
Yes.
But also, not just biologically, there are changes going on mentally. There are changes going on physically. There are changes going on socially. That is the season where every teenager is the most withdrawn. So parents are at a loss also. Why is he behaving weird and stuff like that? And so I think that everybody is just wandering around in darkness, trying to find what the problem is. So like I said, the things we point at as the problem are just symptoms of the problem. The thought I had was when I said that young people, when I start having these conversations, people say, oh, but this guy is 12. Is he not too young? Purpose, identity, all those kind of things. And I take you through history. And I find a lot of figures and icons that we celebrate today. That's the reason, I'm going to piggyback to another book that I wrote even before Why Teens Fail. I wrote The Teenagers of the Bible. It is not a religious book, but that's the book that I read. But I went to find that most of the Bible icons, heroes that we celebrate were all teenagers. I'm doing a volume 2 of that book, by the way. They were all teenagers. Name them. The Shadrachs, the Daniels, the Josephs, all of them were all teenagers. So what happened? What changed? Why suddenly do we have teenagers who we treat like kids when they really can do stuff if they were properly prepared, trained, and empowered? And so that's the place for mentorship. That's where mentorship comes into it.
Wow, amazing. I think this is so in a nutshell, one of the reasons teenagers fail is because of identity crisis.
Yeah.
So inability to articulate who they
That
are.
identity.
Yes.
And I dare say, I like to look for trouble with parents sometimes. I dare say that as much as the teenager is in that crisis, even the parents are in the same crisis of identity. They are not able to even articulate who they are raising. Because if you know you were raising chicken, you use the right feed. But now you don't know the difference between chicken, fish, eagle. And so you give them anything.
Yes.
And they're supposed to just turn out. Like all of us turned out okay. We didn't turn out okay. We just stumbled on okay. We did not turn out. We just stumbled on. We just stumbled on okay. We're not okay. Look at our society. We're not okay. Look at our generation. We are not okay. And that's because at 30, somebody is still attending Purpose Discovery Conference. Why?
Do you get?
Why attending Purpose Discovery Conference at 30? What?
And then at 40, you'll be like, I think God is speaking to me.
Why?
At 40, that you should be talking about retirement. And
you should be looking for who to hand over that thing
to.
But that is the crisis of our generation.
Okay,
that's the problem.
Now that you're already going in this direction, I'm going to still bring you to talk to parents, since you're already looking for that trouble. We'll talk to parents shortly, but I want to take you back to memory lane of your teenage years. Because somebody could be wondering, okay, so did you have it all figured out as a teenager? What was the teenage years for you? And we have a lot of teenagers watching this show. So I want you to talk to them about your own teenage experience, the good, the bad, the ugly. I mean, what were the things that happened? Were you able to articulate your personality, your identity, or were there mistakes that you made that you would do better today?
Of course, everybody has mistakes, but I wouldn't use the good, the bad, the ugly because I don't know about all of those. Yes, mistakes and challenges. Did I articulate that? I think I did. However, that's where I talk about mentorship. It's one thing to articulate. It's another thing to begin to engage.
Yeah.
All right. So, destiny is in 3 phases. There's discovery, there's development, and then there's deployment or delivery. Those are the 3 phases of destiny. So it's one thing to discover it. It's one thing to articulate it, which is a whole subject on its own. But after you have done that, the training, the development, because the development is long. It's long and it's not beans. The development is long, all right? That is where I would say I had a challenge. Okay, so I stumbled on a lot of things, like plenty things. You know how you go to a buffet. If it was your first time in a buffet, you just want to eat everything there. You will fall sick. You will end up, in more trouble than when you came. But that's the thing about discovery, yes. But I think I had a lot of challenges with the development aspect because until you develop, you can't deploy. Until you grow. A lot of persons talk about passion. Passion is not going to get you anywhere until you go submit passion to a process of refinement, a process of development. Then you're going to make a lot more profit out of whatever it is that you have identified. So yes, that's what I will say to that. It's one thing to identify who you are, what you're about. It's another thing to put yourself and plug yourself into the right space. Okay, so let me go back to the story of Simba, the Lion King. at some point in that wilderness, he discovered. I think there was his old-time friend that came back into the picture, Nala, and started to remind him about his identity as a king.
Yeah.
Okay, so now that you know, if you continue to hang out with, what are those names? Those two, there's the Pumbaa and Timon, I remember them. You know, if you continue to, that one of them is, I'm trying to remember, one of them is a pig, I think, and then the other guy is, I can't remember now, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
As long as he continued to hang out in that crowd,
Yeah.
nothing is going to happen.
The knowledge won't help.
Yeah, the knowing is one thing. I say that a lot. Knowing is 10% of it, as big as knowledge is. Knowledge is 10% of the equation. The discipline of execution, the discipline of growth is a lot more difficult. And then the biggest component of the process is the environment.
True.
Is the environment. No matter how much manure and water we put on this floor, and you drop a grain of maize, it won't grow. Pour water, put manure, it won't grow here. So environment is the biggest component on all of that. So you identify it, and then you begin to work on developing and processing that gift, whatever it is. But you must also be conscious of the environment where you plant that seed. It's going to determine a lot the outcome you will get from it. Yeah.
This is a whole lot to unpack.
Yes, that's why we do a whole lot to help people unpack it. Yeah.
And if you're watching this show up until this time, I want to believe that you've been learning something, particularly if you're a teenager. So it means that if at the moment, if you're a teenager and you have an idea of who you are, you've discovered yourself, you need to subject yourself through a process. You need to subject yourself to a discipline that helps you harness, that helps you grow into who does what you should do. Because you can't do something if you've not become someone who can do that thing. All right. So I think this is a very important point that you've mentioned. So that will take us to the next question, which is, what role did your parents play in the entire picture? So on this platform, we celebrate parenting.
Okay.
And we inspire teenagers.
Yeah.
So, but at the same time, we also want parents to learn how important it is to, first of all, connect with their teenagers, connect with their children, but because we're dealing with teenagers here, connect with their teenagers and guide them in the way they should go. So, what role? Did your parents play that role? If yes, how did it impact you? If no,
well, to an extent, so it's a yes and no, because like I said, most of us just stumbled on a number of things. But yes, to the extent that they provided that environment for me to be able to identify what it was. Then, of course, all of the care. I have a great relationship with my parents, both of them. Okay. Very good relationship. Like, my friends say that no matter what you're discussing with Dozie, if my father calls me, that's the end of that our discussion. I will gist with him. All right, so we have that.
You're lucky.
Yes, I am. I am.
Because I know exactly what I'm saying. Lucky you.
Yeah, I am. I say that to parents. It's important. It's important that you have that level of connection with. You're not going to have all the influence on your teenager's life. There's something that we like to talk about. My mentor would say that when your child gets to their teenage years, your influence in their life drops. That's when they have friends and then other adults before you as a parent. So the role of a parent is to be able to ensure that you put your child, your teenager, in that space where they can pick the right quality of friends. You cannot pick friends for your teenager, but you have the power and the resources to determine where they choose their friends from.
Yeah.
All right.
The right environment.
So the right environment. Yeah. That's where you have influence. But a lot of times we fight in the wrong environment. No, you have influence somewhere. Use that influence and deploy it properly. But back to my story. Yes, my parents did all of that. We had our fair share of fights.
Okay.
Yeah, we had our fair share of fights because it got to a point. Me self I can waka. And so
okay.
I've always been very thirsty when it comes to learning, when it comes to opportunities where this and that. Because I think when I talk about stumbling, I think part of the mistakes is getting some things late. All right. So, but when I did, man, I pursued it. And so when I started pursuing those things, yes, I ran into some problems with my parents. Of course, I did. Where were you? Like, I I could wake up and travel. And where are you? I went for one conference somewhere. Things like that. And we'll have all those kind of fights. But yes, that's what my growing up was. But in all of that, yeah, we sorted out ourselves and we have that relationship.
Okay, so you mentioned something about parents connecting with their teenagers. How do you think a parent who is watching this show and saying, my teenager cannot talk to me, she doesn't, like, they just know that they don't have any relationship, that the only thing they have in common is that we're in the same house. I feed you, I pay your fees, you wash the plate for me, but there is no emotional connection. So what advice can you give to such parents? What can they do to, get back their teenager?
Humble yourself.
Why does it have to start with that?
It starts with humbling yourself because
Okay.
I wonder why I said that, but it starts with humbling yourself. It starts with allowing yourself to be a young person again. Okay. I said humble yourself because a lot of parents make the comment that I was once a teenager, and no, you were not. A teenager in 1987 and a teenager in 2017 are in two different worlds. So yes, you were once that age, but you were not ever in their age. Yeah. All right. So humble yourself. There are certain things they will need to tell you, and it's worse if you want to start when they are already teenagers. That question you ask is a question for people who are just starting. All right. It's easier to build a connection. Psychologically, connection is the first 2 years of a child's life. It's the best time. But yes, there's always a remedy around it. And that's where you have to be calm. It won't happen in one day. It won't happen in one night. They're not going to suddenly. But you have to be willing to do the work. You have to be willing to listen. It takes, when I say humility, it takes humility to listen. To not say, do it because why. A teenager will ask you why. Especially today's teenager will ask you why. And then if you are like our fathers, they will tell you, because I said so. Because I said so no longer works today. Because I said so, no, you have to explain. There has to be, so you have to take the role of a mentor, quote and unquote, where you teach, you show, you tell why. I think that most of the time, if young people understand why, they are willing to go. And then take it easy also. Every young person is adventurous by nature. You just want to make sure.
Say that again.
Every young person is adventurous by nature. So you just want to make sure, like I said, what you can control is the environment. You can't really control all of the actions, all of the details, but you can control the scene on which they play.
Exactly.
And then you can let them fly. And yes, it's going to take a while, but over time, it works out. It works out.
Great. Thank you very much. I think it's very important that parents find ways to consciously connect with their teenagers. And what you just said resonated in many ways. I mean, just this afternoon, I was talking with a parent who is literally losing her twins.
Okay.
And they're both teenagers. And she is... So the point where you said humble yourself, I just laughed because it was almost the exact word I used for her. Because I was like, you need to calm down. You've already gotten it wrong. So there's a process to going back. It won't change in one night. So I love it when you said that. And to parents, I think it's important that we get it, that we need to be humble. In the intentional parent community, we call it humility agbada. Exactly. You have to wear it. Wear enough.
You cannot come and be the boss. You are the boss. But if ever you have to announce that you are the boss, then there's already a problem. There's a way to be the boss. There's a way to influence a young person. There's a way to, practical example, there's a way to say, I don't like that music you are listening to, which is one place where
one crisis area.
That's a generational clash. All right?
Okay.
The music you are listening to. Yeah. Why you all of that? How about you listen? How about you listen? So that you can have serious things to say other than I don't like the music. Because once you say you don't like that music, the next question is why? And now you don't know why you don't like. The only reason you don't like the music is because it was sounding bish, 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 bish. There's no that thing. There's no that reason. But if you listen carefully, you probably will get some valid reason why we can have a conversation. once we can, because that's connection, you're looking for connection. But if we are dishing out instructions, as much as I'd like to tell young people, and I always say, follow instructions. Nobody arrived at destiny without a set of instructions. Okay? But let's have a conversation. Let's have a conversation.
Thank you very much. Now that we're just talking about parents and the teenagers, what are the major challenges that parents have in raising teenagers today? You work with a lot of parents because you work with teenagers, right? So you work with them by extension. So what are the major challenges you've seen parents struggle with in raising their teenagers today?
Is that thing I talked about, the gap. Expecting that the way it was, as it was in the beginning, so shall it be, what's that thing we used to say? But expecting that that's how it's going to always be, it's a problem. Times change.
Yeah.
And in every field, not just parenting, if you refuse to change with the times, the principles are not going to change. Right? There are foundational principles that cannot change. But the methods, the approach, the strategies are going to change. That is where the problem is. The parent wants everything to remain the same. Your teenager calls you BBT, by the way. BBT is born before technology. So if your teenager calls you BBT, you're born before tech. You must come back to learn how to interact with a digital native. All right? You may have to learn how to use your Android phones, your iPad. Have you ever wondered that this guy never learns it? He doesn't need to learn it. They pick it up and they are on their way. So that's just an example to say there's always that clash. The clash of how I was raised. How I was raised. And that's why adults in my generation will say we don't need to go and learn parenting. You're joking. You have to go and learn it. Say we turned out okay. You are lying. We did not turn out okay. I've said a number of quarrelsome things.
Very, very
but
true.
But that's the thing. The things have changed, and we cannot raise our children the way that we were raised. Okay? When we were raised, do you ever remember that when you were growing up, there were no telephones? You had to go to one big box and enter inside and buy phone booth, and buy call card that had 30 minutes inside, and then you start talking and you be checking and all of those kind of things. I was in church on Sunday, and pastor was saying, when I grew up, television used to start by 4 and close by 10. And today, you guys have to deal with a generation where everything is on the go. So you're learning. As a parent, you're also learning. You have to be humble about that part of I am learning, and so that everybody can get on that journey. The other big issue that parents are having with teenagers is the issue of tech, the issue of screens. Okay, the idea of parenting young people with screens, children now, and then so we have issues with teenagers and screen addiction. I'm currently doing a work on that subject about digital addiction. It's a big issue with young people. And amazingly, the parents that are quarreling over it have no idea what to do about it. So you can't just be screaming everywhere in the house. It's not going, it has never solved any problem. Okay? Knowledge is always going to solve that problem. But you ask about what the challenges are. That's really what the challenges are. It's a clash of generations. If I will put it in a bigger way, it's a clash of civilizations. All right, these guys are civilized differently from how we are civilized, or we were civilized. And so being able to match, when I talk to parents, I call it cultural intelligence. Being able to understand today's culture, the teen culture, the pop culture, as different from your traditional culture where you are coming from, and being able to seamlessly interface those two experiences and find the values in both of them, because there are values in both places, and find the values in both places and then use those values to empower a generation. That's the conversation we should be having.
Fantastic. Thank you. I'm glad that you didn't just mention what the challenges are. You also suggested what the solution would be. And one of which is go for knowledge.
Yeah, go for
to
knowledge.
learn how to blend
Go
that
for knowledge.
too.
Yeah.
So you see what the problem is, you know what to do about it. And that is what this show is about. We celebrate parenting here, but we also want you to do what you should do. Do your best, your utmost best in raising the next generation of teenagers. I'm going to give you an opportunity to give a teenager watching us today your $1 million advice. And that is how we're going to be wrapping up today's show, all right? So I wanted to give a teenager a 1 million advice. And what will that be? You have a chance to give, just for a moment, that advice.
Is there $1 million advice? If there was one, I would say wisdom is a principality. There's one of my favorite quotes is that wisdom and knowledge will be the stability of your times. In the midst of chaos, in the midst of all kinds of civilizations and crises, wisdom and knowledge will be the stability of you as a young person. So go for wisdom, go for knowledge, learn as much as you can. One very great thing about being a young person is that you have a natural flair for curiosity. You have a natural curiosity, quest for learning, but learn the right kind of things, pursue the right kind of things. And that will be my $1 million advice.
And I think it is $1 million enough. So thank you very much for that.
All right, thank you.
And before I let you go, Coach Chiedozie, you have a book coming up,
Yes.
or rather books.
Yes, I have a number of books coming
of
up.
resources coming. Talk to us about it, because parents might be interested.
Okay, so I mentioned that I did Teenagers of the Bible.
Okay.
I'll start from there. I'm doing a volume 2 of that. In the first volume, we had about 7 chapters or characters that we're looking at. In the second volume, I believe there are about 9 of them or so that were studying in the second volume. And so that's what it is. The book really, like I was trying to say earlier, is about Bible heroes, historical figures, some of them not very celebrated, but most of them the celebrated heroes. But I try to find others as well who are young people who made significant difference in their generation as young people. As young people, I give you a typical example. The almighty King David was anointed king at 16. A lot of persons forget that part. Amazingly, he did not arrive on the throne until he was 29 going on 30. According to the history. And so you would see that he took 13 years of development.
Yeah.
So he's going to be different from the guy who is going for Purpose Conference at 30. He's going to be very, very different. But that's what that whole book is about. So it's about different lives in the books of the Bible. So we studied about them, and we're trying to bring out life principles, time-tested principles that can apply to today's young person, and they can use it to make the most of their lives. That's the first book. The second book is on smartphone addiction. So it's an entire conversation around smartphone addiction, the psychology behind it, and what you can do, how not. Because a lot of young people will agree with you that they are addicted. Yeah.
But how do they now come out?
Get out of it.
Yeah.
So that's what the second book is about. The last one is the one I find most interesting is The Gift of Boredom. That's what that book is. It's The Gift of Boredom. It's about how to unbox creativity. Teenagers are always talking about it.
I'm tempted to ask but I also know that someone is saying The Gift of Boredom.
Yeah.
Tell me more about it. But I'm going to leave that curiosity until the book is out.
When the books are out. We are starting pre-orders in a couple of weeks.
Okay.
I think first or second week of October. Pre-orders will be ready. So you better keep your fingers crossed and wait for us. There will be a lot of scintillating freebies for those that get into the pre-order offers when we do that.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for the work you do for teenagers around the world.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here at the P&T show.
Yeah, so before I let you go, give us your handles. How can we reach you? How can someone connect with you?
Chiedozie Eze on Facebook, at Teen Success Academy NG on Instagram. Those two will give you access to me on any platform. Chiedozie Eze at Teen Success Academy NG. If you're on Instagram, I'll say that again. Teen Success Academy NG on Instagram, and you'll find me.
Fantastic. We're going to add the link to all of his socials in the comment section. So if you want to reach out to him, you can just click on the link and you'll be right at his doorstep. It's been a pleasure having you on
The
the show
pleasure is all
today.
mine. It's been fun being here, man.
Thank you so
Thank you
much. And I
very much.
hope we can have a second
Yeah, hopefully
episode of this.
we'll see how you bring me all the way from Abuja again to Lagos. Yeah, it's interesting, and I'm glad to be here.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
All right. So it's been a beautiful, beautiful moment with Coach Chiedozie. I hope you enjoyed the show. Thank you so much for being a part of this journey. Thank you for being a part of this community. Go ahead and like this video, subscribe if you've not subscribed, and share with someone, share with the parents of a teenager, share with the teenager, and tell anyone that cares to listen that on this platform, we celebrate parenting and we inspire teenagers. See you in the next episode.